lot of news to cover, guys. A lot of news to cover in our time today. So let's just get right to it. Let me just pull up the chat, the Substack live chat. It'll just take me a moment. We're adding, assuming it's working. Let me check. It looks like it is working. We're adding Instagram today, my friends. So that's new. Let me just pull up the live. There we go. Okay, so I can see the live chat in Substack. Unfortunately, for my friends on Instagram and folks on YouTube, I haven't quite mastered the tech yet. So I haven't quite figured out how to see the chats in those places. My apologies for that, but I'll get there. It's one step at a time. One step at a time. Valerie and Eric, how are you guys? Thank you for joining us. But there's a lot of shit going on this morning, my friends. Actually, I've got the wrong window up here. Let's start with, let me see if I can find it. That's not where I want to start. After all of this, I didn't even prepare I have so many stories I want to cover today. I didn't even prepare the main story. I didn't prepare a window for that. Oh, it's okay. I can talk about it. I'm a little slow on the uptake. I'm a little behind today. So before we get to, there's obviously a lot of Epstein news, but the big story this morning is Prince Andrew being arrested. As a matter of fact, let me just pull it in here on a separate window. Let me just pull in a new tab. Let's just do Prince Andrew, and we'll have this kind of running here. Then at least I'll have the story up. Let's just do NBC News. It doesn't matter where we go to. Everybody's got the story right now. So the big news this morning, obviously we all woke up surprised, but not surprised, right? Hey, Rodo, how are you? We all woke up to the news that Prince Andrew had been arrested. Now, that's not a shock to any of us, but it is in a way, because although there have been other arrests and investigations, or I should say indictments and investigations in other European countries. A former prime minister in Norway has been indicted. There's an ongoing criminal investigation into folks that were related to the Epstien sex trafficking ring in Poland. The UK government, one of the top aides to Prime Minister Starmer, was, potentially is under had to resign, and who knows what's going to happen with the British government as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein. There's a handful of folks here in the U.S. An executive at Goldman Sachs, she had to resign. There's a handful of folks here as well that have been held accountable somewhat. But Prince Andrew is really, I think, the first really big, really high-profile personality that lots of people know about who has been, arrested. I think Prince Andrew is really the first one, and the first one that everyone knows about. And I think that's why this is so staggering to everyone. I think this is why. Hey, Paul, how are you? I think this is why this is a little bit of a shock to the system, and a healthy shock. Now we're going to talk in a couple of moments, because the arrest of Prince Andrew certainly makes the way that the federal government here in the United States handling this, the way that the U.S. Department of Justice handling this, certainly shines a light and magnifies the abject, corrupt, fucking stupidity that we are seeing going on here with the Department of Justice. Sociopath Pam Bondi leading it, dingbat Todd Blanche, just under her. all of whom are covering up for certainly powerful men here in the United States of America, but they're all most certainly covering up, as far as I'm concerned, for the village idiot Donald Trump, because I don't see. I know most media outlets are sort of dancing around this, but Donald Trump is implicated in the Epstein files. There's no, I mean, he may not be implicated. I've said this a million times in a million lives. The village idiot Donald Trump may not necessarily be implicated yet, although he may be, in a court of law where he could be indicted, although I don't see why. But there's certainly enough evidence, I've said it over and over again, to suggest that the village idiot Donald Trump is implicated in the court of public opinion. I think you have to really dispel disbelief at this point. If you're paying attention to the news, if you're paying attention to what's been going on with the Epstein saga, you would really have to dispel disbelief to honestly and sincerely move along with the assumption that Donald Trump didn't rape young women in some capacity, in at least one case with Jeffrey Epstein. I feel like you'd really, really, really have to stretch to buy into that, right? So when we see what's going on, when we see authorities in Great Britain arresting Prince Andrew, those of us here in the U.S., we have to say to ourselves, what the fuck? How crazy is this? Like what, one of my friends on Instagram, I can't think of, I don't, let me pull up her handle right now. Because she had a great post a little bit earlier today about this. I just want to see if I can find. So I'm not going to play her post. I don't have permission to play it on here, but her handle is Pull-Ups Pasta Politics on Instagram. And she makes such a great point in her post about this, because not only are we dealing with the absurdist hypocrisy and geopolitical embarrassment of the United States covering up the Epstein files while all of Europe is investigating their creeps, their alleged creeps, their potential pedophiles, right? And Great Britain just fucking arrested the most high profile one in the entire country, if not all of Europe, right? Not only are we dealing with the humiliation here in the United States of that reality, right? That we're covering up while they are prosecuting. But as Pull-Ups, Pasta, and Politics, one of my friends lets us know on Instagram, this also could put the Department of Justice into hey, Arashagi, how are you? This also could put the Department of Justice into a difficult position, the U.S. Department of Justice, because what happens, in Great Britain, they have access, as far as we know, to all the Epstein files that all the rest of us have access to, right? The Department of Justice website, that little section, that little silo, that almost unreadable, nearly unsearchable silo of PDF documents intentionally labeled with all sorts of dumb fuckery to make it almost impossible to find stuff, although good investigators are finding a way to do it. Hey, Ping You, how are you? Good investigators are finding a way to do it, right? But that reality is that the British authorities have access to the same redacted stuff that we have access to, half of the Epstein files. But what's going to happen in order to prosecute Prince Andrew, if they choose? Right now, the prosecution looks like it has to do less with raping young girls, although maybe that's coming, and more with Prince Andrew sharing what I guess would be considered classified information when he was a trade representative or something with Jeffrey Epstein about Southeast Asia. It looks like that's what the wrongdoing, what the arrest was about. But they raided residences that Prince Andrew lived at. So they're certainly looking to see if he's a sexual abuser, right? And in order to make that case, or just maybe make the espionage case, or the trees, whatever the case is going to be against him, right? Treason, releasing classified information, whatever it winds up being, the authorities in Great Britain may need access. They may request access. They may demand the Department of Justice release those unredacted files to them so that they can prosecute them. They may demand that if the U.S. Department of Justice has other files, as we know there's at least 3 million of them, if not more, they're telling us there's 3 million files that we haven't seen and we don't need to see because they're fucking irrelevant, unimportant, 3 million unimportant things, right? Nothing to see here. It's all duplicates and shit that you don't need to know about, right? Right? Well, what if the British government now says, we need that? Pamela Joe Bondi, can you send that to us? And as my friend Pull-Ups Pasta Politics on Instagram, I recommend you follow her. She does great news reports all day long, but also just she does this really comprehensive, what I'm talking about very quickly, she encapsulates much more eloquently and intelligently in a 2-minute Instagram post that I'm stretching out to 6 minutes of babble that time that you'll never get back. So check it out. But she kind of goes into this idea that she uses the term that they're gonna find themselves in a pickle, right? The Department of Justice might find itself in a pickle, right? Because what if the government of Great Britain requests those files for their prosecution of Prince Andrew, and Pam Bondi says no, or the village idiot, no, we're not gonna release. You can't send them. I don't like them in Great Britain. They're not very nice to me. They're not very nice. They like me a lot. I've got a great relationship with Starmer, the guy. He's in charge. A great relationship. We're good friends. He's my best friend. But don't send the files over to him, right? And then what if? Then the authorities in Great Britain decide to go public with that, to make a thing out of that, right? Sorry, guys. I still have a little bit of this lingering fucking cold or whatever it is. Just a little bit of post-nasal drip. But what if, right? And what kind of clusterfuck might the Department of Justice find itself in next? And imagine the optics of that. Anyway, just some food for thought. Just want to, before we read, I want to read a little bit of the reporting today, and then we'll kind of get into the, we'll go on to another story, because there's a couple of what I think are related stories. At least there's a through line through a couple stories we're gonna cover today. But just keep in mind the absurdity of the moment, because if my job is nothing else, it's always to remind you that we're going to be okay because they're so dumb. Because they're so dumb. Oh, Gamer Vet Dad, the final big trigger is disclosure, and this is possibly leading to that today. For those of you guys, we do have I brought Instagram is now in the feed. I finally achieved in the live stream, so we're live on Instagram as well as YouTube and Substack. So for those of you, I don't think we have any Instagrammers here yet. It might take a while for us to. It took me a while to get up to 1,000 followers, but I just got there. So we're just starting to go live on Instagram. But for those on YouTube and Instagram that may not be that haven't joined us. in the Xenocracy community yet. What GamerVet Dad is doing is talking about is he has been he's one of our Substack subscribers, and he has been he writes articles for us as well here at Xenocracy, and he's been doing sort of a deep dive, a deep analytical dive where he's been comparing and contrasting some of the political and legal triggers that took down Richard Nixon. And he actually has an AI tool that he uses, as well to help sort of prognosticate what might be coming next in this. And he's been pretty fucking accurate, right? And so he's sort of categorized these triggers that we saw take down Nixon. I mean, we didn't see it. I wasn't born yet, but historically that took down Nixon, and he's comparing them to similar triggers that seem to be taking down Donald Trump one instant at a time. And he's not seeing, just to kind of give you a gamer, we have some articles, some deep analytical dives on here at Xenocracy. If you're from the other communities, come if you head over to xenocracy.news. That's my Substack. That's where this community is, and you can read a lot of that. You can read some of that. You can hop on there and find these articles and kind of follow through on those institutional triggers. It's pretty interesting stuff. And GamerVet Dad's making a prediction now. The final big trigger is disclosure, and this situation is possibly leading to that today. And that could be what he's kind of getting at is that might lead us to a complete isolation of not necessarily impeachment of the village idiot Donald Trump, but a complete isolation of the village idiot Donald Trump. So it's something to think about. But irrespective, let's kind of get into the news a little bit. Let's because I've been babbling for the last 20 minutes, and I want to make sure I don't dispel any misinformation. So let's kind of read the reporting a little bit about this. Prince Andrew arrested following Epstein files revelation. Police arrested the former Prince Andrew on Thursday on suspicion of misconduct while in office, following weeks of new revelations over his relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The stunning development marks the first arrest of a member of the royal family in centuries and makes him the most high. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of the live. He is the most high-profile figure to face criminal accusations in a scandal that continues to sweep in some of the world's richest and most powerful. Now, hey, Miss Petty Ann, how are you? I want to remind you guys, because really my hyper-focus obviously is U.S. politics. And my hyper-focus within U.S. politics right now is, in essence, saving our democracy, right? Is as we kind of deal with the village idiot Donald Trump, and we look at ways to isolate this presidency as a community, a community of pro-democracy citizens, which is most citizens at this point. My interest, in the Epstein files is obviously accountability and peace for the victims. And, here in the U.S., accountability for the village idiot and a return to the rule of law. And my biggest curiosity is how this affects the village idiot Donald Trump. And I think Prince Andrew is, because he's the most high profile person thus far who has been arrested in conjunction with the Epstein files. And because I fully expect, I can't imagine we're not going to see a domino effect now across Europe. And we're not going to see more and more people who aren't Donald Trump here in the United States outed, resigning from their positions as CEO of wherever or whomever. I expect the next, here in the U.S., as we get more and more reporting, Les Wexner is the I expect him to be the next, shoe to drop here in the U.S., especially after his closed-door deposition yesterday. We're going to hear more and more reporting about that. Wexner is under a microscope right now. I don't know. I mean, he's not. I mean, he's in his 80s. He's probably retired. He's a billionaire. So I don't know that. He loses his job, but I don't know what he resigns from. But I would expect that there's some going. Although there'll be no legal accountability until there's another president here in the United States and a new Department of Justice. I expect something to break with Wexner. And maybe he'll have a come to Jesus moment as he's getting older. And maybe, I know, I'm sure I'm naive for hoping and thinking this, but maybe he'll find in himself the courage to admit to own up to his crimes, and look for, what's that word that I'm looking for? I'm looking for what I think he would look for: redemption, if such a thing is possible. I know that's unlikely, but one can dream, right? A guy can dream, right? But irrespective, as the dominoes fall all around the world, and they will, and the U.S. becomes further and further isolated as it pertains to the Epstein files, right? We become further and further isolated as it pertains to the Epstein files. I see that through line finding its way back to the village idiot Donald Trump, whatever that means. And that's the micro, right? But let's take a moment and expand out to the macro, right? Because I've said for months and months and months now, the two issues that are not going away, that Donald Trump can't, well, we have a third now too, but the two issues that the village idiot cannot outrun, no matter what else is happening in the news. And I haven't seen this in politics in decades, where you have issues that stick no matter how quickly the news cycle moves, right? The one issue is Epstein. And we all, we talked about that. Hey, Angie T, how are you? Hey, Sweet and Dante. Let's have the Maggie Christians give them up for Lent. That's pretty funny. But the two issues were was the economy and was the Epstein cover-up, right? That's not good. Now we also have a third, which is the murder of two U.S. citizens, two white U.S. citizens in cold blood, right? On video, Renee Good and Pruitt, right? Alex Preddy, right? So those things are not going to go away, right? Those three things. But the things that destroyed Trump politically were the high prices of all the shit because of the stupid fucking tariffs and the debacle, the economic debacle that we're living through, the jobs recession and potential actual recession we're living through right now, juxtaposed against the Epstein cover-up, right? That's not going away. But as the world kind of as the world begins its accountability marathon, where it starts holding people accountable, and we become not just a pariah but a geopolitical embarrassment, because here in the U.S. we are not doing that. We're just covering it up to protect Donald Trump, right? We will become further isolated. And if you compare that isolation, or you add that isolation onto the economic isolation, right? We've been talking about this for months and months and months now, right? Canada is negotiating right now, there's been plenty of reporting, its own unilateral trade deals with Southeast Asia. Canada has a trade deal with China now. Canada has a trade deal with the European Union. Mexico has quietly negotiated their own trade deals with China, with Southeast Asia, with the European Union, right? China has negotiated its own trade deals with folks on the with the more trade deals because we've stepped away from this and we've become so isolated with the entire African continent, right? And we're boxed out. And that is going to become clearer and clearer and clearer as the months lead into a year, and the year leads into 2 years. That all of these countries that have the U.S. was sort of the glue that held the international trade consortium together, and the village idiot Donald Trump and Howard Putz-Lutnick and Peter Dingbat Navarro and all of the rest of these goofballs, sort of ripped us out of the international trade union, for lack of a better term. I just made that up. It's not a thing. And we're completely isolated now. And we're going to pay the price for that economically as these countries, not just come to realize they don't need us anymore, but have created their own international global trade consortium so that they don't need us anymore. When you add that isolation, right? Howard Butler, it's pretty funny. You add that isolation to the how I expect we'll become isolated in terms of the Epstien accountability campaign. And, we're going to be like Russia. We're going to be like North Korea. We're going to be except the difference between North Korea and Russia is those are actual authoritarian nations. We're going to be an idiocracy. We are going to be an isolated idiocracy. We're going to have an idiot who's a wannabe, unsuccessful authoritarian, just fucking up our lives left and right, running a country that we have allowed him and the dimwits surrounding him to completely isolate. And we're going to be we already are, but we're going to be an expansive geopolitical embarrassment and a disgrace. And it's something. The arrest comes after a remarkable fall from grace for the brother of King Charles III, who was stripped of his titles last year and is now known only as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and is yet another blow to Britain's beleaguered royal family. The king expressed his, quote, deepest concern, unquote, at the news Thursday and stressed that the law must take its course. Mountbatten Windsor, who turned 66 Thursday, has always denied any wrongdoing. We'll see how long that lasts. The Thames Valley, there is actual, there's, hey, CG, I just have to grab a tissue, guys. I'm going to have to get up for a second. But there's an actual picture of former Prince Andrew molesting a young girl. He's nearly almost laying on top of her. Hang on, let me just grab a tissue. Don't go away, anybody, but my nose is running, and that will be disgusting for you people. Thank you, guys. Sorry about the delay there. Okay, here we go. So, the Thames Valley Police said in a statement early on Thursday it had arrested a man in his 60s on suspicion of misconduct in public office, which carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment in the UK. I didn't know that until just now, right? So, his nose is, it's always running. It's the story of my life. Thank you, Gallo. That's pretty, that just struck me that he's, that he could be potentially facing life in prison. Now, I don't know if that really means life in prison, if that's the possible sentence, or if the UK sentences people like they sentence them here, where it's like, somebody could be facing life in prison, but they don't usually get life in prison for that. They get 5 years, right? Again, depending on the crime. So I don't know what that means, but I would imagine that if Prince Andrew would be facing life in prison, he might be very eager to cut a deal. Once, he may be done, at some point denying his, declaring his innocence and maybe wanting to cut a deal. And we don't really need to watch these guys flexing in the background here. But while I don't know what the fuck that is on NBC News, on one of their ads. He might be willing to cut a deal, and what would he, what could he possibly give, prosecutors in the UK, that could get him out of trouble? I mean, other people in the UK who might be affiliated with Epstein. I don't know that it would benefit prosecutors in the UK if he outed Donald Trump, but it'll be interesting to see. But that's quite something. The police force, which covers an area in southern England where Mountbatten Windsor used to live, did not name him, as is standard practice under British law. Quote, "We understand the significant public interest in this case, and we will provide updates at the appropriate time," Assistant Chief Constable Oliver Wright said. Following a thorough assessment, we have now opened an investigation into this allegation of misconduct in public office. Earlier this month, the Thames Valley Police said it was looking into a claim that the former prince, while serving as UK trade envoy in 2010, had shared confidential documents with Epstein. One email in the latest U.S. release appears to show Mountbatten Windsor forwarding Epstein a report from his special advisor about the then prince's visit to Southeast Asia. Mountbatten Windsor has not commented on the latest batch of files published by the Department of Justice. His arrest caps years of growing pressure on Mountbatten Windsor, the son of the late Queen Elizabeth II, over his years-long friendship with Epstein. Police said they were searching 2 addresses in Berkshire and Norfolk. Mountbatten Windsor lived in the Windsor's Royal Lodge in Berkshire until earlier this month. His new home on the Sandringham Estate, a royal residence, is in Norfolk. Earlier news photographers captured what appeared to be unmarked police cars arriving at Mountbatten Windsor's home in Sandringham. Norfolk police said in a statement that they were, quote, supporting a Thames Valley police investigation into misconduct in a public office. So, thank you for bearing with me. I know reading, a straight up news story like that can be, uninspiring and uninteresting. But I think it's important, when these stories break like this, we take a moment, because there's so many quick hits on social media. Prince Andrew arrested, there's so many quick hits, and that's the world we live in right now. That's the social media world, and so be it. But on the lives, I feel like we have the time to kind of sit down and really inform ourselves beyond the headline. And that's why I like to read these things, in the live. And I just feel like it's a little less cumbersome and uninteresting if we read that together. And that's why I do that not infrequently. Let me see what you guys have, though, before we move on. Gamer Vet Dad, it needs to be small wins up to the midterms. Don't let the fear statements he makes dictate our actions and our view of reality. Gamer Vet Dad, you're talking about the village idiot Donald Trump, right? In terms of, I know you're referring to this as well, but I'm guessing you're talking about like the threats to send the ICE Gestapo to, polling stations and, other things that he does to generate fear to try to stifle the vote and the rest of the creeps. I agree with you as well. And don't think that this, again, I think there's a through line from what's transpiring in the United Kingdom right now to Donald Trump and to Donald Trump's further isolation, and to how this will affect Trump politically and how democracy continues to get saved. Because as other countries begin to honor the rule of law in their country, I think there's a trickle-over effect here in the U.S. I don't think people will be tolerant. Pignew, in the UK, life imprisonment usually means 15 years. I did not know that. Okay, after that, release on parole is often possible. So That's still, thank you for that, Pingu. Thank you for that insight, and that information, because it's really helpful. I mean, I can't, again, I can't imagine if Andrew is facing 15 years, if he's going to be able to handle that, right? I can't imagine that if enough evidence is collected to hold him to account, and then subsequently, if evidence is collected to not just hold him accountable for, public corruption, um, but also um, sex trafficking of any kind, I can't imagine he's not going to be desperate to cut a deal. And he's got to know a lot of stuff about a lot of people. And let's take a step further. I know this is wishful thinking, but let's look beyond just um, you know, prosecution in Great Britain and in Norway and in Poland and hopefully someday here in the US. What about the International Criminal Court at The Hague? What about crimes against humanity? There was some reporting, and I just glanced at it because there's so much reporting all the time about all things. But there was some reporting, oh, man, and I just caught it briefly about, I don't know if it was someone it was an official somewhere in Europe, I think, that talked about how these may not just be crimes within our country, and they may not just be perceived as crimes against just these young women, but these may be crimes against humanity. And where do they get prosecuted? In the International Criminal Court, in the ICC. So, Prince Andrew, there's no reason to think that if Andrew faces 15 years potentially in his own country for, sharing, in essence, what's classified data with Epstein, and that as that story evolves, and if a UK government, beyond just what we've read in the Epstein files, but finds further evidence of Andrew's sexual assault of young women and sex trafficking, then there's no reason to think that this isn't something that the International Criminal Court would look at. And I don't know if plea deals are a thing with the International Criminal Court. I don't know how that works, but there's no reason to think that the UK would pull an Israel or a Russia, like Israel is holding, Benjamin Netanyahu is accused of war crimes or crimes against humanity, and so is Vladimir Putin, but neither of those countries are going to send their leader over to the International Criminal Court to face justice. But I'm not so sure that Great Britain would not send Andrew to the International Criminal Court to face justice. And that could be something that inspires him to talk, if that's even an option. And Njeri, great point. There are apparently there are international victims, so that's fair point. It was a UN statement, Gamer Vet Dad. Thank you for clarifying and keeping me honest. So it was a United Nations statement that crimes against humanity may be in play here. So it's something to consider. So I want to mention too, and again too, just in case you just joined us from any platform. Today was the first day that I was able to go live on Instagram. I was able to finally get that 1,000 followers on Instagram. If you're on Instagram but you're not following me yet, please do. Please help me build this community out on Instagram as well. There is, I can see, I can't see the Instagram feed yet. I have to kind of figure the tech out so I can look at that feed. So I apologize for not being able to see you guys who's here. We're live on, I can see that we're live on YouTube and nobody's there, but still, we'll keep going there because somebody will come there someday. And of course, since the beginning, we have been live on Substack. If you are out there and you're interested in joining our community here on Substack, because the name of the community is Zenocracy. You can find us on Substack at zenocracy.news. You'll get all of these live streams. We do additional Gamer Vet Dad, one of our subscribers, writes articles from time to time for us. He's got a great piece, a great series of pieces out there right now. I'm going to start to be doing some Substack only lives for paid subscribers because we have a paid option. You'll have access to those. And if you just want to support my work, because it can be difficult to find ways to support your the influencers that you rely on that provide the news and info that you need, please come over to Substack, and you can certainly subscribe for free. And I would so appreciate that and love it. But please consider coming over there and subscribing as a paid subscriber to help support the work as well. And Substack is starting to grow as well a little bit. And for those of you that are free subscribers, if it's something that is important to you and that's something doable for you, because I'd rather see you subscribe to Midas Touch News Network for a paid subscription because they have much larger reach. But once you do that, right? Once you do that, if you want some deeper analysis and you want to support my work, please consider joining me here on Substack as a paid subscriber as well. Now back to the news. So in addition to there's an Epstein story. There's an Epstein story that I just caught on a whim today. When I was prepping for the live today and I knew I was going to be talking about Prince Andrew, I just fell into this story, and I know it's going to go nowhere, at least for now, because Prince Andrew rightfully, I shouldn't even call him Andrew, the pedophile, his indictment, his arrest, took over the news cycle. But there's another story that is important that no one is going to hear about today except us. And that is not it. Hang on, let me find it here. Oh, here it is. Sorry, guys. Let me go back to there we go. Here's the story. NPR broke this story today, 5:25 a.m. And I only read a glimpse of it. But just from the headline, I feel like this is a fucking barn burner. And I almost feel like NPR. I almost wish the NPR editors would have sat on this for 2 or 3 days, or even 4 days, because it's going to get lost. And this is one of those moments where there's a plethora of reasons why I wish I had a platform as large as Don Lemon's now, and I am going for that. That's my long-term goal. Don is my North Star. That's my goal, to get there eventually. But I wish I had a platform as large as his, because this story, people need to know that this story is out there. We're going to know, and we're going to do the best we can. How Epstein and Maxwell used an elite Midwest art school to prey on girls. I'm just going to straight up read it, because I didn't have a chance to read the article before I came on live. I saw the headline just as I needed to get on here, but I feel like it's going to be a barn burner. Years before they were convicted sex offenders, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell used his wealth to gain access to a prestigious boarding school for young artists in Michigan. Using a rental lodge Epstein donated to the school as a base from which to recruit some of their earliest victims, according to Department of Justice records and former campus administrators. Now think about, we're going to keep reading it, but think about how fucking sick this is, right? They used Epstein's money to gain access to a boarding school, and then using a rental lodge. Epstein donates a lodge, an entire fucking building, to the school, and that's the base which they used to recruit some of their earliest victims. I mean, Sometimes I think as we get into this Epstein story, and when we had Arik Fudali on last week, when one of the lawyers for the Epstein victims, when we had him on, he kept stressing what kind of fucking monster Epstein is. And I think, yeah, and I'm guilty of creating this too, but I think because the politics are so severe, right? Thank you, Kimmy. The politics are so intense, and the news cycle, and myself included, we're so hyper focused on building our communities and clickbait that the politics are what people are responding to. But when we think about the how what kind of fucking deranged, dented, you know, I don't even know what word is, inhumane creeps, scumbags, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were, I mean, they were some sick fucks. Like, they set up shop outside, donated a fucking building and set up shop outside of a private school to recruit victims. You're right, Kimmy. You can't make up the cruelty of these people. You wouldn't see this in a movie because it's too horrific, and you can't make this up. The idyllic, nearly century-old Interlochen Center for Arts, tucked between two lakes south of Traverse City, features grade school and high school level programs in music, theater, dance, and visual arts, among others. It's famous as an incubator for young artistic talent and boasts alumni such as Josh Groban, Nora Jones, Chappelle Rowan, Felicity Huffman, and Divine Joy Randolph. NPR reviewed hundreds of pages of Department of Justice documents on Epstein, interviewed current and former Interlochen officials, and spoke with a woman who says that as a teenager at the school, she was targeted by Epstein and Maxwell. What emerges is a portrait of Interlochen as an institution that celebrated openness, but that in accepting Epstein's financial support became unwittingly associated with his crimes. So let's read that again. I'm just checking the time, guys, because I have to bolt in a couple of minutes. I'm so sorry. We have our whatchamacallit, our briefing a little bit early today. What emerges is a portrait of Interlochen as an institution that celebrated openness, but that in accepting Epstein's financial support became unwittingly associated with his crimes. I don't even I want to comment on this, but it's so hard to fucking read this right now, that I can't even I can't even say anything. Let me just read. I'm just that I think I'm overwhelmed by how sick and cruel these people are. It's hard to believe. Epstein's association with Interlochen dates back to 1967, when, as a 14-year-old bassoon player, he attended the school's summer camp. When he renewed his ties to the school in the 1990s, Interlochen viewed him as a loyal alum and major benefactor, administrators said. He lavished the school with donations and used his power and influence to gain access to spaces where the administrators felt young kids and artists were safe. That's it, Kimmy. It's hurting. You feel like it hurts your heart. Like, in hindsight, mistakes may have been made, but it was just out of naivete, Russ McMahon, a former administrator, said of the ability Epstein had to access the campus. From 1994 to 2003, McMahon was the director of annual giving and later the director of major gifts at Interlochen. Now, guys, I worked for about 5 years at a college in Pennsylvania, Gratz College. I was the IT director there. I went to school for a little bit there, but then I just took the job there. And they were a nonprofit that always needed money. And I was really close to, really good friends with the director of development, the person who, you know, tried to get money from big donors. And for years at the same time, I was very involved with, I'm not so much anymore because I don't give a shit anymore, but I was very involved with the Jewish community, with all different synagogues, big ones, small ones, all different, and I would watch these organizations, these they were all nonprofit organizations looking for ways to get donors, right? And to get money. And there was a lot of ass kissing that had to go on. There was a lot of coddling. There were a lot of great donors too, donors who would just give money anonymously and with dignity and all that stuff. But I came to believe, and I came to think that in that world, in that nonprofit world, people who are, soliciting donations, it's a tough job, right? And you got to put up with a lot of shit, right? And I could see how from, all of my experience working with nonprofits, I worked for the Jewish Community Center for a couple of years in Las Vegas. Like I had a full-time job there as a kids programmer. And I had a lot of fucking jobs, guys. A lot of jobs. As it just does, none of it makes any sense if you think of what I do, but I had a lot of jobs, a lot of places. But they were always trying to get money. I worked for a short time for the Red Cross. I worked I worked a lot in the nonprofit world, and I could understand how, if you have a big benefactor that suddenly, basically makes your year every year, you know, you could conveniently not see things. Um, I I can, I can get that, but as I'm just already reading this article, I struggle to wrap my brain around the idea that this guy, Russ McMahon or McMahon, however you say his name, didn't know young girls were being raped. I can't imagine that it. And look, guys, we have all these through lines, right? We have the through line that we talked yesterday. We covered the Les Wexler, the billionaire who was deposed by the House Oversight Committee yesterday behind closed doors, and we talked about that. Who is also connected to Epstein, and he seems to be the guy that connected to Epstein to rich and powerful people. There's at least one accusation from Virginia Giuffre, which I believe that she was raped by him, one of Epstein's victims, and she says that Wexler, raped her. I don't think she uses the R word. She assaulted her, had sex with her, whatever. In my mind, it's rape. But then there was that also, we also talked about yesterday how there was this through line, this connection between Les Wexler and Ohio State University, right? And he was obviously a big donor to Ohio State University. And right now, there are, directed to that case because there was a doctor, I can't remember his name, who was sexually assaulting, young men of the members of the wrestling team. Jim Jordan is the guy who's not implicated in the crimes, Congressman Jim Jordan, but implicated in covering up that sexual assault. And then there's this connection between Ohio State and Wexler, indirect connection, very indirect connection to Jim Jordan, but the central figure seems to be the molester in the middle of it, right? And now there's this reporting that folks investigating what happened at Ohio State are trying to get documentation from Wexler that he doesn't want to give up. And so how many years? The reason I'm making this point here is it's another example of a school, a nonprofit organization, probably taking so much money in from a big donor who was connected to one sexual predator, Jeffrey Epstein, on the one hand, outside of the college, and now we know was connected to another sexual predator, inside the fucking college. So what I'm trying to say is I'm not saying that Russ McMahon or McMahon or however you say his name is in any way, shape, or form implicated in the Epstein files. Who the fuck knows? I'm just reading this for the first time. But I am saying that if you were a development director in any of these places, taking money from these very wealthy people, and people were being raped, how the fuck do you not know? A woman who testified at Maxwell's 2021 criminal trial said in a lawsuit that she was 13 years old when she first met Epstein and Maxwell at the school's annual summer interlocking arts camp in 1994. She says they began a relationship that started with grooming and led to sexual abuse. NPR does not name victims of sexual abuse. A few summers later, Epstein and Maxwell met a 14-year-old student who said her first contact with them at the school was the start of a manipulative and controlling relationship that lasted years. Former administrators at Interlochen told NPR that the time of these encounters, the campus, which includes summer camp and a year-round boarding school, was very open, with students, faculty, visiting artists, and concert goers all mingling in the common areas. Interlochen says it has long maintained a policy that prohibits unsupervised contact between donors and students, but because of that open atmosphere, former administrators say that enforcing that rule was difficult or impossible. Look, fuck them. I'm sorry. Fuck them. My son goes to a private school. We can't afford it. I get it. Right? We do it anyway. I talk about it all the time. We spend money we don't have because we want my son to go to a Montessori school because that's important to us. But you know what? It's a school where there's kids. There's fucking little kids, and it goes all the way up to middle school. They're all in there, right? We all pay tuition. Some, probably, I'm sure some of the wealthier folks donate lots of money to the school. And I appreciate that because we wouldn't be able to go if they didn't do that because we can't afford the school. We can't afford full tuition, right? But there's no way in hell, right? That and they're donors from alumni, kids who went to the school, who love the school, and families that love the school, that have wealth, that donate to the school. Now, I go to lots of events at the school. We try to be as active as we can. We're probably not as active as we should be, but we try to be as active as we can, my wife and I. And I know lots of people at the school. There is no fucking way that you would have a situation in this school where donors, whether they be current or former parents, or just some fucking guy, who wants to donate $1 million. There's no way that any of those kids ever, from the babies in the daycare to the 8th graders, I can say with certainty, there's no fucking way that there is not some parent somewhere that knows who the fuck is talking to any kid at any event at any time. I've never seen it. There's no way. I'm not going to name the director of the school because I don't have permission to do that. But she's a fucking powerhouse. And there is no way that she doesn't know what's going on all the time with everyone. There's a fucking open... there's plenty of events where the entire community is there, right? There's plenty of events throughout the year where... the kids are putting on this sort of thing, and half of them are fundraisers where we go and buy hot chocolate, right? Or we go in and we buy whatever, right? There's book fairs and there's 24 events a year where we parents are interacting freely in public events with the children. But don't feed me a line of bullshit, Interlochen. Not that I matter to Interlochen, but don't feed me a line of bullshit that you couldn't fucking find out, that somebody just missed, that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey fucking Epstein were, were recruiting kids. You didn't notice it at the rugby game or the fucking violins concerto recital. Stop it. What the fuck? That strikes me as, I don't know, but that strikes me as one of two things or both. One, this guy is donating millions and millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions. He built a fucking building. I just got a raise as the development director because I'm bringing so much fucking money in. The head of the college, or not the college, of the school looks really good. He or she, headmaster, whatever they are, gets a raise and gets tenure, whatever the fuck. There's no tenure in private school, but whatever the equivalent is. So they just turn a blind eye, right? There's no way you don't know. Or there are people at that school who are criminally liable, who were on Epstein's payroll, who are Epstein's recruiters. Maybe there's a third option. Maybe there's a fourth option. Maybe there's a fifth. I don't know. Maybe there's more than my narrow-minded perception of what could be. But I really, and granted, I understand I'm very biased because you guys saw 20 minutes ago when I first started reading this article, I was already really triggered by it because the sick fucking cruelty that it's just hard to believe it's real, even though it's real. And I think I have some personal guilt because I'm ashamed of myself that for all these years, I did, as an influencer, I wasn't paying attention. I've talked to you about this a million times, guys. I feel like I should have been following this Epstein stuff, certainly at bare minimum back in 2016. I couldn't have even told you who he was back in 2016. I know he wasn't he wasn't indicted yet for the big sex trafficking ring, but I knew nothing about what happened in 2008 with Alex Acosta, and even when fucking Alex Acosta and the sweetheart deal, even when he became Trump's Secretary of Labor, I knew nothing about this. I didn't know that he was involved with these fucking creeps. So, maybe part of my trigger is, as just part of the community of concerned citizens who didn't talk about this enough and didn't pay enough attention to this when people like Virginia Giuffre were suffering day in and day out because they were being threatened and abused after the physical abuse was over. We didn't get it out there. So maybe there's some of my own guilt in here for not participating, as a source of information, about that, and just for not knowing about it, because that's a disgrace that we didn't know about it. But you combine that, I'll own that, and you combine that though with how horrific all this is, how unbelievably cruel and fucking sick this is, that these and the fact that I never knew. I was so naive for so long that we had this community of these entitled fucks, who just didn't follow the laws like we didn't follow the rules and got away with it. And now I'm reading in this article this bullshit. Come on, this fucking bullshit that the school didn't know about it because we had an open policy and everybody got together as a community. How could we have ever seen this happening with our open policy? Fuck off. I mean, stop it. However, since Epstein's crimes have become public, Trey DeVay, the current president of Interlochen, said no student is allowed to be unsupervised with any outside adult, and the campus has significantly increased security. How Epstein and Maxwell targeted students. Epstein visited the school for brief stays over several summers between 1994 and 2000, according to testimony from Epstein's personal pilot found in DOJ documents. In recent years, the two women who said he preyed on them related similar stories, one in court records and the other in an interview with NPR, about their initial on-campus contact with Epstein and Maxwell, saying the pair walked a small dog that they used to help break the ice. After getting to know the young artist, Epstein would then dangle the prospect of financial support for their education, according to the women's stories. The women who met Epstein and Maxwell in the late 90s spoke to NPR recently, said Epstein went on to pay her tuition for Interlochen's year-round boarding school and offered also to finance her attendance at a top-tier conservatory after graduation. To this day, the woman said she isn't sure what drew Epstein and Maxwell to her, but she feels like there was some criteria she was being measured against, whether it was looks or talent. Either way, she said the pair were able to gain children's trust and enter their lives. Quote, every kindness, every conversation, every moment you thought someone believed in you was calculated, she said. When you were no longer useful, you learned that none of it was real. Interlochen says Epstein's last donation to the school came in 2003. In 2008, the school says it severed ties with Epstein and removed, quote, all donor recognition in his name, end quote, after he pled guilty in Florida to charges of solicitation of prostitution and solicitation of prostitution with a minor under the age of 18. Epstein was arrested a second time, and we know all that already. Contact with underage campers. The woman who spoke to NPR said that she felt that unlike the many other adults and donors who visited campus, Epstein and Maxwell had ulterior motives and used the camp as, quote, a doorway to teenage girls without parents around, end quote. She described them initially as, quote, very charming, very warm and interesting, end quote. On their first meeting, she said the pair asked her probing questions and, quote, gave each other glances and little looks in response to her answers. The woman said she spent time alone with Epstein and Maxwell at Epstein's lodge on campus. As an adult, she said she now views their actions as the beginning of a, quote, grooming behavior, end quote, designed to make her feel comfortable, and that they had taken a special interest in her aspirations. The woman said she never reported the relationship to Interlochen officials. Years after those meetings on campus, she said the relationship began to fray when she started saying no to some of Epstein and Maxwell's requests. It came to an end when they asked her to accompany a high-profile person to a gathering in New York. When she refused, she was cut off emotionally and financially, with Epstein reneging on a promise to continue funding her education. Quote, it was keeping somebody on a leash. If you said no to them, there was fallout, the woman told NPR, describing their relationship. She said she believes they felt, quote, no remorse, end quote, for betraying the trust of children. Quote, the very things that should be a child's greatest qualities, their trust, their openness, their hope, were the exact things you used to manipulate them, she said. Quote, how can you make a child trust you, care about you, and then squash them like a bug? The woman who testified as Jane Doe during Maxwell's 2021 criminal trial said she was approached by Maxwell in 1994 while sitting on a bench in the main campus area eating ice cream with classmates. Maxwell was walking a, quote, cute little Yorkie that the girls asked to pet, she said. After the other students returned to class, the girl stays behind with Maxwell, who was then joined by Epstein, according to the woman's testimony. The pair asked for a phone number, contacted her mother, and arranged a meeting with the mother and daughter at Epstein's Palm Beach, Florida home. The woman said in her testimony during a 30-minute conversation there, Epstein hinted at the possibility of paying for the girl's education, telling her mother, quote, I like to mentor young students who are artists, and I love music, and I love dance, and I give all kinds of scholarships, the woman said in her testimony. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it. I'm going to stop there. I hate to stop as we're into this story, and it's It's quite a learning experience here, but it looks like there's quite a bit quite a bit more to the piece, as you can see here. So, if you want to read the rest of it, I certainly will later. Go to npr.org, and it's the top story right now, and I hope we can find a way to to magnify this story. I don't know how, but it needs to not disappear in the news cycle. Anyway, guys, thank you for being here today. I mean, that was a rough story to read, but we have to know it, and these scumbags have to be held accountable. 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, one live at a time. That's how we get through this. That's how we've gotten this far. You just chunk what you can do. You take as you do it as much as you can. You stay in the fight for democracy. You stay in the fight against fucking authoritarian idiocracy. Take a breath when you can, because you still have the privilege, thankfully. We're those of us that have the privilege to take a breath when we can. The rest of us will hold the line, and then you come back in. We made it over a year. I don't know how the fuck we're going to make it another 3, or almost 3, but felt like times we wouldn't get this far, and we got this far. So you just keep grinding, keep driving, and we're going to get through this. I love you guys. Thank you for the group therapy. I really clearly needed it today. I'll be posting throughout the day. If you don't follow me on Instagram, please do. I'm trying to build that community. I'm on Facebook now as well. I'm building out there. Certainly on YouTube. We're developing some plans to build out a YouTube show. And please head over to Substack, Xenocracy.news. Please subscribe if you can, and it's something you're interested in. Please consider a paid subscription. That's how I continue to do this work. And I will see you guys tomorrow, and I'll certainly see you on all the socials throughout the day. Thank you, Kimmy. Thank you so much. I love you guys. I'll see you soon. Be well.